This video contains spoilers for the main campaign, Fractured Futures, Fire Emblem Kindred Ties, and Chronos' story. You can play the main campaign for yourself, view the story Fractured Futures in a different video on my channel, and until Kindred Ties ends, you can read Chapter 1 of Chronos' story from the banner page. So, Dragalia Lost's main campaign, as well as the Fractured Futures anniversary event, both feature time travel, and there exists a theory that the two are connected, and that Zethia in the main campaign is from Audric's world in Fractured Futures. Today I'm going to run through what I believe to be the full timeline, as well as the evidence that supports this theory. But first, I need to explain what multiverse time travel is, as it's likely the type of time travel used in Dragalia Lost. For starters, multiverse time travel is probably how time travel works in the movie Avengers Endgame. Time itself is not being traversed, but a different reality that is temporally offset is being entered. There are three types of realities in the multiverse: parallel, branching, and alternate. Parallel realities are all identical, but given a universal point in time, all of them are experiencing a different present moment in time. They are all temporally offset. Branching realities are realities that share identical intervals of time with another reality. They can either branch away or branch together. These are the kind we see in Fractured Futures and Fire Emblem Kindred Ties. Alternate realities are realities that share no exact commonalities. For instance, the world of Fire Emblem is an alternate reality from the world of Dragalia Lost. Closed time loops occur when someone jumps into a parallel reality, and different timelines can occur when someone jumps into a reality and cause it to stop being parallel and begin to branch. With that out of the way, I'll now do a run through of what I think to be the story from the start of Fractured Futures to where we are in the main campaign. To begin, Phares tampers with the sacred shards to release the other. We know this from the Chapter 11 interlude. Aurelius sends Euden to make a dragon pact and retrieve a new shard for the kingdom from the Mistholt, because theirs is failing. The pact is because only pact holders can move the shards. Aurelius ends up getting possessed by the other in the Binding Ruins while Euden makes this dragon pact, but Euden does not meet future Zethia in this timeline. Euden then meets Ranzel, Elasan, and Cleo. The other, as King Aurelius, kidnaps Zethia, and Euden goes around making dragon pacts to get stronger and save her. He meets Luca, and the chapters play out the same until Chapter 4. This part is a little uncertain, but has a set number of outcomes. Zethia is possessed at some point, Aurelius lives, and the other possesses Euden after possessing Zethia. One potential series of events is as follows. Zethia does not appear at the end of Chapter 4 and send Euden and company straight to the Binding Ruins. Without Euden and future Zethia at the Binding Ruins, Zethia is possessed, Aurelius is likely captured, and Zethia becomes Empress. Euden, still wanting to save his sister, keeps making dragon pacts and ends up offering himself and his dragon pacts to the other. The other accepts for some reason, which may be his dragon pacts, his connection to Elysium, the possibility of Chronos, the other no longer needing Zethia, or something we haven't seen yet, possibly relating to the circumstances of his early childhood revealed in Chapter 12's interlude. Moving back into the more readily known timeline, the other, as Euden, kills several of Euden's friends, but Aurelius, Zethia, Nott, and Ranzel escape. Ranzel may be presumed dead at some point, as Nott is surprised that he's alive later in Audric's story. The other forms Chronos from the Great Worms, likely using black mana as he does in the main campaign, and proceeds to wreak havoc as he conquers the world. Aurelius and Zethia make a plan to send Zethia back in time to prevent this outcome, and Zethia travels into the main campaign. The other catches wind of the plan and sends Chronos after her and uses our reality's Euden to track her down. Meanwhile, Audric rounds up as many survivors as he can find, including Raymond, Sinoa, and Eric. Audric learns that Chronos is trying to thwart their plan and attempts to thwart the thwarting. This is what we see in Fractured Futures. Chronos successfully kills future Zethia in a different timeline, allowing his creation in it. This either branches into a reality we haven't seen, or just branches back into Fractured Futures again, since Zethia has yet to make any major changes. With Cassandra's help, Euden is able to follow Audric into Audric's reality and face off against Chronos, where they win. Euden's Causality then returns him to his timeline. In Audric's timeline, Audric is still fighting the other in Diurnell, so in an attempt to fix it, he seeks Cassandra to break his causality and permanently jumps to the main reality. Everyone else dies. So now that I've listed out a semi-chronological series of events, let's look at some story beats at different points to garner evidence to support this theory. Let's start by looking at the main campaign. First of all, future Zethia cannot stay long because causality pulls her away each time, but she can use mana to stay longer. We know this because she said she needs more mana before she begins to fade. Also, future Zethia may maintain her outfit to hide her identity, but she may also have been permanently altered after being possessed by the other. This is one of the possible reasons she summons fiends in the prologue. On that note, future Zethia initially wants to stop dragon pacts because she doesn't know how to stop the other from entering the world, but she does know how to stop Chronos from existing. Reasons may include not having time to explain or knowing that Aurelius will be possessed regardless, but she attempts to use fiends to dissuade Euden from continuing. She shows up again immediately after the pact with Jupiter in chapter 4, and sends the group directly to the Binding Ruins in pursuit of herself and the other, so they arrive much sooner or even at all in this timeline. Here she tells the group they wouldn't believe her if she explained, which is partially true because the other isn't even mentioned until mid-chapter 5 where Mim brings him up, and it's also partially I don't have time to explain my entire backstory right now because causality and time-sensitive mission. At this point, future Zethia knows that her past self will try to seal the other before the possession transfer and decides to try and double that power with her future self's presence. It doesn't work. It's also fully possible that nobody in the Fractured Futures reality knows what caused the other's appearance, which was fairies. Audric knows when and where he got possessed, but also knows that changing that would probably have other terrible outcomes that they can neither predict nor prepare for accordingly. Before parting, future Zethia gives Euden the advice, seek the Dawn Shard for your own, something we have yet to see crop up again. She then teleports the group away from the Binding Ruins at the end of chapter 5 to save them, but this is likely an impromptu resort over a change to the timeline, since sending them there at this point was already a major change. Next, I'll look at the evidence presented in Fractured Futures. To start, Audric is able to time travel through time to where Chronos is. The intricacies of this aren't explained aside from his connection to Chronos, but we know that it is something he can do. It's also likely that by the same principle, Zethia is able to travel into the main campaign when the other is there, and teleports to where Euden is at that time. At both times she shows up, the other's vessel, Aurelius, would be at the Binding Ruins. This may also be why Zethia doesn't travel back even further. This may also be why Chronos needs Euden, as temporary time travel like this needs some kind of bond, like Chronos' dragon pact with Euden, Audric's bond to Zodiark, etc. Also in Fractured Futures, Audric isn't trying to stop Euden from changing history, he's trying to stop Chronos from finding Zethia, because she's already going to change history, and stopping Euden is just synonymous with stopping Chronos. Audric is using an alias for potentially several reasons. First, he knows that he will be pulled back to his time and may be trying to spare Euden from more emotional pain of losing him again, as well as circumventing explaining himself to garner more time to act. Chronos does recognize Audric as a time traveler and chooses not to kill him several times, either because Zodiark's will still resides within him, or because he's exclusively after Zethia, or because he knows that revealing his true power prematurely will stop Euden from locating Zethia. When the other is first released in front of the Halidom and Euden tries to stop him, he immediately knows what causality is, meaning that he would have some knowledge of time travel feasibly enough to craft Chronos in the other timeline. When in the Binding Ruins in Fractured Futures, Audric takes the opportunity to attempt to fell the other right then and there in Aurelius' body. The other also once more immediately recognizes that causality has been broken, and shows that he is willing to use dragons that he can subjugate, as he is presently doing in the main campaign like chapter 13, and does in Audric's story as well. When Euden finds Zethia in Fractured Futures, her response is no, it can't be, because she already knows she's been followed and found when Euden shows up, especially when Chronos is at his side, and he shortly confirms it's time travel, confirming her suspicions. As Chronos kills Zethia, he says, all will be made right now. This is my true liege's wish as well as my own. It's the other's wish to get Chronos, and Chronos' wish to be created. And because the changes Zethia will make starting in chapter 4 won't occur if she dies right here, the timeline will be righted according to the other. Zethia is able to recognize who Chronos' true liege is. She refers to the liege as him, which while it may just be author ambiguity to hide some facts from the audience, she could also mean Euden, who is standing right in front of her. Audric recognizes the Halidom when he gets back to it with Euden, so he's been here before, but he's unsure, so he may have only seen it in ruins, suggesting that his freedom was garnered much closer to when Euden took on the other. Also, Audric says that trying to affect causality might make Euden no different from the other. This line is important because up until now, the only ones who have tampered with causality are Zethia, Audric, and Chronos with Euden, yet Audric brings up the other. This practically confirms that Chronos' liege, who willed Zethia's death via causality breakage, is the other, and we also know that Euden will be Chronos' liege, meaning that Chronos' liege is a other possessed Euden. And yes, Audric and Zethia are tampering with causality too, but other Euden probably started messing with causality first by creating Chronos the Time Dragon. At the end of Fractured Futures, Audric offers to tell Euden more about the future, but Euden declines. Audric likely wanted to tell Euden how to avoid this outcome. Next, I'll look at the evidence presented in Audric's story. At the start of Audric's story, dragons of the Empire attack, including Pele, Sylvia, and Phantom. The main thing to note here is that all of them appear normal, not altered by black mana as the void dragons are in the event quests and story. This could very well be the case if they were obeying a dragon pact instead of being directly controlled. Additionally, Euden likely would have made pacts with them along the way as their stories unfolded naturally in order to build his arsenal and save his sister. Or maybe it's black mana, or the other has Melsa, Felicia, and the king what's-his-name hostage. Basically, they're working for other possessed Euden. We know that Chronos is defeated in Audric's home timeline, because he only mentions Euden's causality at the end of Fractured Futures, and Parallel Zodiark is with him in his story. At the end of his story, it's most likely that Audric arrived at the Halidom after the events of Chapter 5, as even though Fractured Futures could land him anywhere after Chapter 2, he would otherwise make changes to the timeline earlier on that Zethia makes in Chapter 4 and 5. At this point, we can probably just forget about the Fractured Future because Audric leaves and literally everyone else dies. Finally, I'll look at the evidence provided in Kindred Ties and Chrom's story. Chrom's story itself is a prequel to Kindred Ties. In it, he is dropped into a future where Euden accepted the power of the Other to save Alphonse and Zethia and stop rifts from tearing the world apart. Post-possession Zethia appears in this timeline and dies before sending Chrom to the main campaign's world through a gate with her warning. It's likely that travel by gate is a permanent jump that overlooks causality, which is probably what Cassandra made for Audric and Parallel Zodiark at the end of their story. Also in Chrom's story, Zethia is shown to use shadow element magic instead of light element magic, further suggesting that the Other left a permanent mark on her. Zethia also mentions here that Other possessed Euden killed all of Euden's friends. Additionally, Zethia mentions that she was discarded by the Other for Euden. In Kindred Ties, this is supported as well when the Other offers to possess Euden and stop rifts from tearing the world apart. The question that remains is why would the Other make an offer to Euden instead of taking him by force as he previously did with Zethia? In Kindred Ties, Zethia breaks free from the Other for a moment and seems to hint that she's waiting for an opportune moment or event to act against the Other. Kindred Ties also confirms the multiverse, with in addition to the Fire Emblem world existing among other realities, Sharena also glimpses through a rift into a parallel reality, and Cleo discusses the potential of the multiverse. Finally, in Kindred Ties, Chrom is guarding a chamber in the Binding Ruins. This is likely the same chamber in Chapter 5 that was the exclusive location the Other can possess people or transfer possession. That's all I have to present on the subject. I tried to tie up as many loose ends as I could, and there are still a few mysteries in the middle, but it's fully possible that this is close to the series of events that occurred. It would be really cool if the game's 2nd anniversary had another event that elaborated on this further, but until then, it's just a theory. Let me know what you think, if you find any more evidence, or if you find anything that contradicts what I've presented here today, and maybe we can still fit it into this timeline. Thanks for watching.